My name is Clarissa Cornell, and this is my investigative art project for Art200. I have chosen Van Gogh's Purple Irises as my piece of artwork. It has always caught my attention. My mom's favorite artist is Van Gogh, and her favorite is actually Starry Night, but for whatever reason, this particular piece has always been the one that stood out to me. I'm not quite sure why growing up that this was what it was, but for whatever reason it just caught my eye. So I decided to do a little more research into it and found that it was painted in 1889. It's an oil paint on canvas, and it's currently being held at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. It was considered to be one of the most expensive pieces of artwork ever sold, as it is currently ranked number 25 as most expensive art pieces ever sold, and if you include inflation, would be considered the 10th most expensive art piece ever sold. So while researching when this was painted, I actually learned quite a few things about Van Gogh himself and the reasons for painting this particular piece. The piece is set as is a field of purple irises, and there's one white iris in the middle of all the purple ones. And so while looking into that, I found that many people believe that the white iris is Van Gogh, and it's his way of putting himself into his artwork. And he always felt kind of like an outsider because of his mental illness. And it's believed that he suffered from bipolar disorder and epilepsy. And so, but in his time, there wasn't a whole lot of research done into mental illness. You basically either were well or you were crazy, and he was pretty much crazy by his time standards. And so I learned through this that Van Gogh used his artwork to keep himself sane. He has said that he felt that his artwork alone was capable of dragging him out of his deep depressions. He would go into these fits, basically, after his epileptic episodes, where he would have these severe hallucinations. He would become violent, and he felt that his artwork was and creativity is what would keep him sane in between those episodes. He actually wrote lots of letters to his brother and sister, and in one of his letters to his brother, he actually writes that perhaps it would be good thing if perhaps you wrote a word to Dr. Pyron, who was his psychiatrist or psychologist of the time, to tell him that working on my pictures is almost necessary for my recovery. It's because Van Gogh felt that his artwork alone would be keeping him sane. And there is another artist that is alive still, and she is known as the Polka Dot Princess. Her name is Yeo Kasuma, and I'm pretty sure I'm saying that wrong, but she's in her 80s now, and she is a Japanese artist, and she actually lives in a psychiatric hospital and keeps a studio across the street from the hospital that she goes to every day. And she says that her painting is what's keeping her sane. It's what's allowing her to fight her illness, essentially. And she is actually considered to be one of today's forefront artists. She does a lot of work with polka dots. She's a sculptor and a painter, and I believe has worked in the fashion industry also. But she's another believer that your artwork is what can keep you sane. Van Gogh has we actually looked at one of his paintings early in this course. It's the painting of his bedroom, and we were looking at it because of the way that the lines and what was he trying to say with his lines. But I also looking deeper into this artwork and reading more about it, I also learned that he painted it to kind of give himself some peace of mind. He was in this is a picture of his bedroom in his asylum, And he describes it as just this kind of stark place. There's a bed, there's a chair, there's a window. And so to kind of make it more lively in his head, he decided to paint a picture of it the way he thought it should be, the way that would be more pleasing to him. And that's with artwork hanging on the walls and color, as opposed to being these stark, boring walls. Um, he often used his artwork to paint the world how he felt it should be, as opposed to just how it was. Um, he expresses a lot of emotion in his artwork. Another one that he paints is the portrait of Dr. Gatchett, who was he was a homeopathic doctor that Van Gogh sought out to treat him after he had checked himself out of the mental institution he'd been into, and so this was towards the end of his life, and he sought the treatment of still, fighting with these manic episodes of this particular doctor. And he was in Paris at the time, living in Paris when he was under his care, and he painted this doctor. Whom he actually said he did like and he enjoyed, and he felt he had a kindred spirit with. And but it's thought that he was also in this portrait while, painting this man that he was receiving care from. He was also painting his feelings of Paris at the time, which he found very kind of dreary, a very melancholy place to be. And in this portrait, you kind of see this sad look on this doctor's face, and it's thought that that's kind of Van Gogh's feelings of Paris is he was painting and showing through this doctor. And which it's interesting that he put himself in a lot of his work. And so one of the last portraits that he ever painted was called "The Wheat Fields with the Crows," and it's very abrupt, and you can see this beautiful field with all these bright colors, but these dark looming skies, and it's he painted this within, I believe it was a day before he tried to commit suicide. So he kind of paints this picture of, how life should be these bright, happy fields, but, in the back of his mind, he always had this dark storm looming, and that was of his mental illness. And he actually went out into this very field the next day and shot himself in the chest, and then 2 days later, died of the wound. So it just kind of it shows how much he put himself in his own artwork, and that's kind of what brings me back to the Purple Iris painting. Is I think it's something that we can all relate to. Van Gogh painted this as how he was an outsider and he didn't fit in and conform to what society felt a person should be at his time. But we can all relate to that, in that we all go through phases in life where we don't fit quite into what we feel is normal society, or what society feels is normal. Everyone can, I'm sure, relate to that at some point in their life where they've felt kind of outside, and they felt a little bit different from everyone else. And I think that that's why, after all of this research that I've done on this, that's probably why I've been so drawn to this painting, is because it's so relatable for a normal person. And so that's what I've learned from this painting, and I hope that it has sparked some interest in maybe learning more about Van Gogh's life and the illness that he had. Thank you.